Hello, welcome to Synchronicity, talk radio for your mind, body, and soul. I'm your host, Marie Bernard, and today we are speaking with Dave Potter from Palouse Mindfulness. I was doing some research on a mindfulness program that I was creating, and I found PalouseMindfulness.com, which is an online mindfulness-based stress reduction program. And it's created by Dave Potter, who is a fully certified MBSR instructor, which is based on the program founded by Jon Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being with us. Now, I'm quite familiar with mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, because I took a course in it a little over a year ago, and I found it life-changing, which is why I wanted to speak with you on the show. And can you tell us a little bit about, maybe for people who aren't familiar with what MBSR is?
Sure. It originated nearly 40 years ago in 1979 with Jon Kabat-Zinn at University of Massachusetts Medical School. And at that time, yoga and meditation were not terms you'd often hear in a hospital, not as something a doctor would recommend anyway. And John wanted to present mindfulness, to bring meditation into the medical setting. And so he began the course then. He began with patients who the doctors, because he asked, he said, which patients do you think need the most? Which are the patients that you just can't help? And they said, the chronic pain patients. He says, chronic pain means the pain's never going to get better. And all we can do is mask the pain with drugs, but it doesn't really, we really don't feel like we do a good job of making of helping them. So those were his first clients, were the pain patients from medical clinic. And the course he did then is very much like the course it is now. And in the very beginning, it was called Pain Reduction Clinic, and now it's called Mindfulness-based Stress Reduction. Because the truth is, what he was able to do with pain was not, in some cases, the pain would actually be alleviated to some degree, but what it really did was helped the patients deal with the pain that they had. So they went from living a life that was pretty much, unsatisfying, and for many of them just frustrating and miserable because they were in pain most of the time, to being able to live productive and even happy lives, not because the pain went away in most cases, but because they were dealing with it in a different way. And nowadays, it's not just about dealing with physical pain. And we call it mindfulness-based stress reduction, because it has to do with reducing the stress in our lives, which is what enabled the pain patients to live more productive and easier lives. So the course itself has got its roots in. John was very careful not to present the course as something that is a Buddhist practice or a Buddhist philosophy, because the mindfulness didn't originate with Buddhism. But some of his experience was related to his practice and his experience with the Zen Meditation Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And in creating something, he needed to create something that was truly secular, meaning it didn't have religious connotations, just to take the practices of meditation and of mindfulness and put it in a way that people could understand it and use it. And when you look at the books he's written, it's, I'd actually read several of his books before I started teaching MBSR and got introduced to MBSR in taking my first course. And it was only after taking that course that I realized that his books weren't really just sort of popular books, nice to hear a little bit about meditation. They're really quite profound. And the reason they didn't seem profound is because he uses simple language. But what he's talking about and what he's describing and relating the practices is really quite deep, but at the same time very practical. So what the course is an introduction to meditation, which in Jon Kabat-Zinn's terms is, if you were to give it a definition, you'd say mindfulness meditation is about being present and being in the moment, and bring a certain kind of attitude towards your awareness of the moment. So he says it's non-judgmental, but basically it means being kind to yourself. And one of the first things people discover when they begin meditating, almost universally, if they take the class, it's almost everybody, the first reaction is, I'm really not very good at this because my mind goes just everywhere. I'm not, and I seem so scattered. And in some cases, it seems like they're more scattered than they were before they had their first experience of meditating. And a big part of learning this kind of meditation is to hold your own experience in a different way. So rather than, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, or, oh, my mind is wandering and I'm thinking about things and this is supposed to be a blissful experience, they have a different relationship with their own experience, their own thoughts, their own feelings. And that's probably the biggest part of what the meditation, learning this kind of meditation is about changing relationship with thoughts and feelings. Beautiful. So in terms of structure, it's an 8-week class. The first week, we introduced a very simple kind of meditation, which is called a body scan, just checking in with physical sensation. And the next week, a sitting meditation. And after that, then there's yoga and other kinds of meditations as we go along. Each week, and an important part of the practice, maybe the core of the practice, is the core of the class is the practice that students do on the days between the weekly classes. So typically a student would have a 30-minute guided meditation to follow on a recording. In the old days, we used to give people CDs, but now it's this course and others like it are on the web, so they can just get it through their computer or through their smartphone and something like Insight Timer. And in that practice for 30 minutes a day, they begin to shift the way they can pay attention they learn to pay attention to themselves in a different sort of way that ideally carries over beyond the meditation, because it's really not about achieving some blissful, idealized state where everything is peaceful. It's pretty simple. It's just about being with the experience you're having now, and that can carry over into daily life. And a key part of the practice is not just that 30 minutes, but some exercises we get people to do on the time that they're not in the 30 minutes of meditation.
Thank you. So we are speaking right now with Dave Potter, and he is from Palouse Mindfulness.com. That's spelled Palouse Mindfulness.com, Palouse Mindfulness.com. So you were talking about, we mentioned a bunch of things. So I have a whole bunch of questions. Hopefully we can, there was a lot of information there. So you mentioned that MBSR was originally introduced for chronic pain patients in the hospital. And I know that there's been a lot of studies over the years to show how effective this 8-week MBSR course has been for chronic pain patients. And you also mentioned that it's helpful for people of all different backgrounds and whether they have pain or not. You also mentioned the non-judgmental attitude, and I'd love to talk more about that, because I know that so many of us get into meditation and we feel like we're bad at it, and if our mind doesn't focus, we get frustrated with ourselves.
Yeah, and that's really, to my mind, that's really at the heart of MBSR, is that attitude of non-judgment to your own experience. Because we do that all the time. We're so judgmental, more judgmental of ourselves typically than we are of other people. You know, if something goes a little bit wrong, we say, oh, what an idiot I was, or how did I do that, or what's wrong with me, and people carry that over into their meditation. And so when the mind starts to wander, if the meditation is like a breath meditation, which the first meditation we teach is a sitting meditation, is a breath meditation, paying attention to breath. It's really hard to stay focused on breath. It sounds so simple, but almost immediately your mind goes off somewhere else, and then you catch your mind going off. Oh, supposed to be paying attention to breath, and then you bring yourself back. And usually, for most of us, because we think the object of meditation is to be peaceful and quiet and be able to be focused and concentrated. And when this doesn't happen, we say, "Oh crap! Because now I got to get back," and then we beat ourselves up a little bit for not staying focused. Mm-hmm. But that moment where you catch yourself wandering off, whether it's focusing on breath or a mantra or a prayer, like centering prayer in a Christian tradition, that moment where you catch yourself wandering off, what we do is the typical response is to beat ourselves up. But a more appropriate response would be to celebrate that moment of awakeness, that moment of awareness that now you're aware of, you're paying attention to breath. And an analogy I like to use, I think I may have gotten this from Jack Kornfield, is that if you're training a puppy to fetch, you got a little puppy out there who doesn't know how to do that yet, and you throw a stick out, and he may go chase it and pick it up and then drop it, and keep on dropping it, and he might just by accident bring it back to you and drop it at your feet. And when he does that, for the first time, when all these other times weren't working, you don't say, "Bad puppy, you didn't do it right all those times. How can you be off all those?" You say, "Good dog, that's great, you've brought it back." So that's the attitude we try to cultivate in mindfulness meditation, so that when you catch yourself being aware, it's a moment of celebration. And more than that, those detours are not random detours. They're not irrelevant. They are what's going on in your life. It's the things you're worried about, the people you care about, the things you care about. And the difference in this meditation is you can notice them and be aware that that's going on, that's what's happening in your life, but you're not dwelling on them, you come back to breath. That coming back creates a space in which something else can happen other than going over the same internal narrative that you might about whatever it is that's been troubling you, and can actually serve to help process some of the things that were going on. So the thoughts and the detours are not really detours. We say that's part of the meditation. Over time, those detours will become less lengthy, and you'll have more time in the space between. But all of it's important. So that's kind of the idea between the non-judgmental aspect of it.
Thanks, Dave. I love the idea of that moment of celebration when we do it right, because I don't know if this is just human nature or specifically our Western society, but we really focus a lot on what needs to be improved rather than expanding on what's going right.
Yeah, exactly. And Jon Kabat-Zinn would always say, even for somebody who is ill, even chronically ill, even with life-limiting diseases, there are thousands of things going right, or they wouldn't be able to take a breath. We're so complex, and we there's a reason for us to focus on what's wrong so that it can be corrected. But our nature is to be constantly on the lookout for what's wrong, and so we spend all of our time, or much of our time, there instead of what's going right. It doesn't mean you ignore what's going wrong. You're just not going to spend all your time wondering how it happened, beating yourself up, planning for the future. But there'll be some spaces in between where things really can be worked out.
Thank you. I have so many questions about meditation, but maybe we should talk a little bit about why you created PalouseMindfulness.com. Again, it's Palouse mindfulness.com, where you can find free resources. It's the whole mindfulness-based stress reduction course available for you online. So what made you decide to create this website?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, I began teaching the course as an in-person class. I taught it for almost 12 years. The 8-week class, I taught it twice a year here in town, in groups of usually about 20, 25 people. And we met once a week, as I described. And after teaching it for some time, I realized that some of the material actually came about. One student asked me at one point, this is when tablets started to become popular. And he says, you give me these CDs, but I can't put them in my tablet. I can't play this thing. Can you put it up on the web? In a previous professional life, I was very technical. And so I said, well, sure, that should be pretty easy. So I put the meditation, the guided meditation meditations up on the web. And once I'd done that, I thought I might as well put the practice materials up there too if somebody misses a week. So that was a resource for people taking the in-person class to come find those materials. And then every week, I'd always handed out certain articles to supplement the weekly instruction and practice. And I said, well, I could put those up on the web too. So I scanned them and put them up. And before I knew it, I had all the raw materials for an online class. And I just, without thinking too much about, without expecting it was going to take off at all, I didn't really expect it was going to take off. I just thought it was easy enough to do. I just have it there. And if somebody happened to find it, then they could take the class themselves with the guidance that was provided. And because I didn't have any videotapes of myself teaching, and it probably would have been pretty deadly anyway. Most online classes are the same person, even if they're charismatic and talented teachers, the same person, the talking head for the 12 or 13 hours of instruction that the course takes or thereabouts. That can be very deadly. Mm-hmm. So what I did, what I decided that could work, is I found videos that were available on YouTube that were some of the masters of mindfulness, like Jon Kabat-Zinn and Pamela Chodron and Tara Brach and others, and took those YouTube videos, which were public domain, and linked those into the website. So when someone went and was taking one of the weeks of the class, they could go access those videos from the various teachers about what the topic was. And over time, it got more and more coherent, so that the videos related to that week's topic. And to my surprise, it really started to take off. I remember doing a calculation at the beginning. I said, well, at this rate, I'm going to have more students that finish it on the online version than I did on the in-person version. Mm-hmm. And now it's outstripped it by a pretty significant factor. There's almost 2,000 people who've gone through the 8-week class online. And when I taught the in-person class, it was 300 or 400 that I've taught through that way. And one of the surprises for me was I actually didn't have a lot of respect for online classes when I began this thing, ironically enough, because I didn't think they were as effective as in-person. If you have a chance to take an in-person class, that's actually the best way to take it. More because if you start it that way, you're more likely to finish it. What I discovered was if somebody finished the online class, and it takes a special person to start an online class that's as intensive as this one is, because you don't just listen to or look at a recording for a few minutes a week. You're practicing 30 minutes every day if you follow the course. What I discovered is if somebody did that, took the 8 weeks online, listened to the videotapes, did the reading, and did the 30 minutes of practice a day, at the end of that, those people who completed it, and the letters I get from people completing the course validate this, they get as much as an average person going through an in-person class. In fact, my conclusion now is they get on average, this is on average, and there's a number of caveats, of course. It takes a lot to finish an online course, and the ones who finish, and the ones I see are the ones who have finished all the exercises, because that's what they need to get the certificate. That's when I see their work. But if they do all that, the letters I'm getting indicate they get more out of it than the average person taking the in-person class. And that's because the average person taking an in-person class, some of them do all the practices and do all the meditations, but that may be maybe a quarter to a fifth of the people, even though we encourage them to do that. Some of them just come to class once a week and get what they can out of that class, and others just do some of the practices. But the ones who do the online class and finish the practices, those are the ones I see, they get more out of it than the average person who does the in-person class, because the average person doesn't do all the practices.
So, Dave, it sounds like you're saying that the projects that you get people to do in order to earn their certificate through PalouseMindfulness.com creates more accountability than just showing up in class.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because if you take an in-person class, you go to class every week, there's a sense of accountability there. There's people that are on this journey with you, and you want to be supported and support them, and so there's more incentive to keep up with it and be accountable in that sense. But when it comes to doing the 30 minutes of practice a day, that's relatively challenging. It's very challenging for most people. I mean, you think about it. Somebody takes a mindfulness-based stress reduction class to reduce their stress. They're already stressed out. They have more things to do in a day than they can possibly do. And then we say, to do the class, you really ought to take 30 minutes a day and do the practice. And the first obstacle most people have is, where am I going to find 30 minutes?
Yeah.
I came to get relief from my stress, not create more stress. And so that's the first challenge, is to do that. And when I did the in-person class, I didn't want to shame anybody, because I knew from experience not everybody does all the practices. And so there actually was a class or two. There's 2 classes I did this. I stopped doing it, where I'd ask for them to submit their practice sheets from the week. But that was not a good experience for people who wanted to do the class but weren't doing all the practices. So I stopped doing that. But the online class, if they want a certificate, I can ask for that. You don't have to get a certificate. You don't have to send me anything. You don't even have to tell me your email. You don't have to sign into anything. But if you want to get the certificate, you've done all the practices, or most of them, and then I see those practice sheets. So in that sense, I see more about what their practice actually is from an online person than I would have from somebody who was taking the class in person.
Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, so the website, PalouseMindfulness.com, again, that's spelled Palouse, mindfulness.com. It's free to go through the whole program. What about the certificate? Because that's extra work for you marking that stuff. Is there a fee for that?
No cost for that. I'm from the beginning, I didn't want there to be any costs at all. I had colleagues who said, you're not charging for the certificate. That's really silly. Nobody would mind paying like $20 or $25 for a certificate. You should do that. But I didn't want there to be any cost at all. And the biggest, probably the biggest reason for me to do this is I wanted to have a way for people to learn mindfulness without having to pay a fee at all. There's, of those 2,000 people who've done the course, they're from all over the world, from 72 countries. And it's not easy to figure out how they're going to pay me, even if they had the resources to do that. And what I used to tell people is I was just lazy. I didn't want to deal with checks coming in and having to do receipts and all that kind of stuff. And I'm at a place in my life and in retirement where I'm not needing the income from doing this class. So it's really a labor of love to do it this way. and for the maintenance costs and for the other costs that are incurred in keeping the website going, about a year and a half ago, I started accepting donations on the site, and not only does that pay for the maintenance of the site, for the hosting of the website and for the tools I need to use and the bandwidth I have to go up and down and putting things on the website. But it's also helping me now to make it available to people, for instance, who don't have any internet access, or have poor internet access. They wouldn't be able to stream a video very easily. So there's a version of the web course that's all on a memory stick, a USB drive, and for someone who asks for that and needs that, I can send that to them. They can do it without having to have internet access, or even if their access is slow. And the donations help pay for that, for the USB drive and for sending it. And my time, this is truly a labor of love. My wife says, when I tell people I'm retired, she says, well, he's not really retired. He's just not getting paid anymore. And it's just that I love being able to do something that I know is making a difference in other people's lives.
I can imagine it brings you a great sense of purpose, especially to see those 2,000 people who've gone through and completed the certificate. I imagine there's thousands and thousands more who've just kind of looked around and not gone through all of it, but still gotten some benefit as well.
Yeah, I know that's definitely the case, because I've got some web tools that they don't tell me, of course, who is logging on, but they give me a accounting of how many individuals have logged on to the site, and nowadays there's between 3,000 and 4,000 different individuals an hour going and looking at materials, and some small percentage of those are actually taking the course, but that's how many people are looking at it.
Wow. Right now, we are speaking with Dave Potter. He is a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor, MBSR for short, and he is at PalouseMindfulness.com, Palouse, mindfulness.com. And the very unique and special thing about PalouseMindfulness.com is that you can take a full mindfulness-based stress reduction course absolutely for free. You can donate if you'd like, but there is no cost for this course. And it, as you've said, Dave, it's really a labor of love for you, and I can imagine that it brings you such, it really, even though you're not getting paid, it really is your vocation to be doing this.
It really is. I mean, I feel very fortunate to be able to do this work. My profession before I retired was as a psychotherapist. And in that work, the people that are in that work, and when their hearts are in it, it's not about making money. In fact, therapists don't usually get paid very much by the time you factor everything in that they have to do to keep their licenses up and what insurance takes out and so on. They do it, and I did it because I had the feeling it was being of help to people. And so now I get to do that in a way where I don't have to deal with insurance, and nobody else has to either. And so it's actually fun for me. And I have a technical background, so the web stuff, that's putting the materials up on the website and keeping things going, that kind of satisfies that part of my of myself. Also, there's another thing that I've done just in the last year. Before a year or so ago, when I instituted the online groups, if someone had a question, occasionally, but not very often, occasionally somebody would write to me and ask me a question and say something like, well, I did the body scan, but whenever I do it, I fall asleep. What do you think about that? And I had an answer for them, but that answer would only go to them. And while there are hundreds or maybe even thousands of people running into the same problem on their own, so that there's an online group that you can join as an option. It's that people can sign up for. And if they have a question about one of the practices, or a question, or they want to share an experience, or just have something that they want some help with, they can post something online. And usually, because there are now hundreds of people on those on the online groups, they get an answer back within an hour or two, which in a way is way better than a once-a-week class, because a once-a-week class, you have to kind of wait to ask the question of the instructor at your weekly meeting, and you might not even ask it because there are other things going on in the class. But in the online group, you can just post it, and an answer comes. Not always from me. Usually it's not from me. It's from another student or another graduate who's done the course, and they get an answer to that question. And that's really been fun to see how that works. And I've done my best to make sure it's not a place where people are advertising things or just posting cat videos or things like that. They're just engaged with the practice itself, and it's worked out well that way. So some people tell me that's not just a place where they find out and feel good about their progress in meditation, but a way for them to connect with other people.
Thanks, Dave. So how do people get involved with that group if they're on PalouseMindfulness.com?
Yeah, they just, if you look at the very first page, there's a paragraph that indicates that if they want to have some support, they can join this group, and there's a link that takes them to a page that gives them information about how to do that. And also, when they get to the point where they're actually starting the class, we have a section called Getting Started. They're given the option there again to go find that page and join the group. And some people like to participate, are very active on it, and many, probably most, just log on to it. It's a Facebook group, but you don't have to be active on Facebook. You can just ignore your own Facebook page if you want. I actually don't look at my own profile hardly ever, but I'm in these groups a lot because I'm administering them. But you can just log into it when you want to, see what questions are being asked or answered, and vicariously enjoy the learning that's going on that way.
Thank you, Dave. Again, we are speaking with Dave Potter. He is a former psychotherapist. Do you still get called a psychotherapist even if you're not practicing anymore?
Well, I call myself a retired psychotherapist. That's how because I'm not licensed anymore, so technically I can't say I am a psychotherapist, but I can say I'm a retired therapist.
All right, retired therapist, and he is the creator of PalouseMindfulness.com, PALOUSE mindfulness.com, where you can take a free mindfulness-based stress reduction course. So the 8-week course is broken up, and you've taken, so a lot of it is links to other YouTube videos and other articles
Right.
that have been created by other people like Jon Kabat-Zinn and Pema Chodron. Is that how you say your name?
Pema Chodron.
And I'm curious, now I've just lost my thought. I had a question for you about one of the mindfulness practices was the body scan. And I know for me, when I was taking MBSR, I spoke with my therapist about it, and she said that it's quite common for people with a history of trauma, which I do have, to find the body scan very uncomfortable. So I tried it for a few days, and I found it like I felt like I was crawling out of my skin.
Yeah, it can be very challenging. That one in particular, because particularly if somebody has it's not unusual in the body scan to have things come up for anybody, some physical things or emotional things. But for some people who have a history of trauma, it can be a terrible experience. It can be very scary. It can kind of trigger a panic attack. It can make people feel out of control. And I was concerned about that in particular when I put this online, because in the in-person class, I can see when that happens, when they're doing that in a class, and we can have a conversation about it. But in the online class, there's not that opportunity. So I did my best to address this in the frequently asked questions. and one of the questions is and is what if I'm feeling emotionally activated, or I have uncomfortable physical sensations? Is something going wrong? What do I do? And in the description of what to do with that, I kind of guide them into a way of discovering whether or not it's just normal sort of stuff. All of us have our own things that are going on with us, and we may get a little anxious during a meditation or have things come up that are uncomfortable. But I needed to get people a way to know when that happens, whether it's something they needed to be concerned about and change the way they're doing the course or stop the course altogether. And so in that description of what do you do if you have physical or emotional things come up, I give them some indication, which basically is if you finish the meditation or the body scan or the yoga or whatever, and you feel worse than you did when you began, and it's scary for you to go back, and it's on the order of a panic attack rather than just a mildly unpleasant experience, then something needs to change. And then I give some hints about how to change the practice, or how to modify it, or when to stop it. And if they're seeing a therapist, they should be working with a therapist in conjunction with the course as well.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I found for me, I made the decision I did push through it and try a few times. And I had tried the body scans in the past with other meditation programs I'd taken. And I just decided to go back to focusing on the breath or another type of meditation because there's a certain level of wanting to push beyond your comfort zone, and then it gets to the point where, is this really serving me to torture myself?
Yeah, exactly right. And that, just what you're describing and touching on there is a real important part of the course, and what the intent of the course is about, is finding for yourself whether or not to go on with something, whether to push into something or whether to back off. And that's not just about the body scan and being worried about panic attacks, but it's about anything. If you have something uncomfortable, do you go push yourself into it and work past your resistance to it, or do you back off, or you find some place in between? And that really is what a key part of the practice is, to discover where that limit is for you. When do you push? When do you back off? How do you find that place at the boundary where effective work can be done?
And it really helps to create that sense of awareness in other areas of our life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because this is not about having a half-hour pleasant experience once a day. It's about creating experiences in the practice that can carry through to the rest of your life. So the very edges you find in your meditation are going to relate and carry you through difficult parts of your day, or can with practice. But it takes practice. That's why we call it practice. You're practicing. Really, you're living and breathing when you're meditating. Just you're living and breathing when you're out in life. But in the meditation, there's time and space to explore your own experience in a different way than you do when you're in life, where things are happening one after the other.
And it all really comes back to that non-judgmental, compassionate attitude towards ourselves.
Yeah, and if there was one way I would describe a successful outcome of the course, or what you could expect out of the course, or hope to get out of the course, is that by the end of the course, my hope would be that people are learning to be friends with themselves, that they're learning to be kinder to themselves in their own experience. And that doesn't mean kind of laying back and figuring everything's going to be okay and never working hard, but just having an attitude towards your own experience that says, the experience I'm having right now is natural. It's a natural experience, and it's possible to be with that experience, even if it's difficult. And it doesn't mean there's something bad about me or something wrong with me if I have a difficult emotion or experience.
Thanks, Dave. There were a couple of great stories that I really enjoyed in the course that I took. I'm sure every instructor does it a little bit differently, but there was with the non-judgmental story was about there was a guy who fell off his horse, I think, and broke his leg.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And everyone was like, "Oh no, it's so horrible that he broke his
Right.
leg." And his father was like, "Well, maybe it is, maybe it's not."
Yeah. And then it starts out with a horse, and the horse breaks his uh, has an injury in the horse, and then uh, I don't remember all the detail, but it's uh, it turns out to be a boon because the horse finds other horses and he now has more horses. His son gets injured, has a bad injury, and he's, oh no, we feel so sorry for you and for your son. He says, well, it's so horrible. And he says, well, maybe. And then the next thing that happens is there's a call for all the young men to go off to war, and it's a very devastating war, and all the young men are getting killed. And they say, oh, so lucky for you that your son didn't have to go to war because this injury he had then now is healed. And he says, well, maybe. And so it's up and down, up and down. And it kind of reminds me of that. I don't remember what movie it was. This phrase was in, was two of the characters were talking about books. And they said, you know, the only difference between a comedy, which is in literature, it's a story that ends happily, and a tragedy, a story that ends unhappily, is when you stop the story.
Wow, that's so true. It's not only when you stop the story, but it's the attitude about the story, because there can be humor in tragedy as well.
Yeah, and there's a phrase, a word that's sometimes used in mindfulness and meditation, equanimity, meaning whatever comes up, you can deal with it in a way that is not you're not pushed to one side or another. It's not torturous and it's not terrible, but you can accept what's going on with grace and with and with peace. Sometimes I say, because one thing that comes up in learning meditation, people will say, very typically, they say, well, you know, I'm doing this meditation, but it's not very peaceful. You know, it's. I mean, there are moments where it is, but these other things come up, and I'm trying to get rid of them, so I have these peaceful moments. And I say, well, you know, there will be more peaceful moments as you practice more, but paradoxically, that's not the point. The point is not to get a state where you're just monotonically in a peaceful state. That's not possible. In fact, the only state you could be in where nothing changes that's bad, or where you have nothing bad happen to you, is if you're dead. There's going to be something's always going to be happening. So, but what can happen, and this is the phrase I like to use, is there will be moments where you're not peaceful. But what this practice is about is learning, and it'll sound kind of weird to say it, but just let it sink in, is learning to be peaceful with not feeling peaceful. Learning to hold your own experience in a different way. So you're kind of doing it from a different place. You're not pushing it all away, and you're not getting caught in the vortex of what's going on. You're at a place where the you that's noticing it has got a stable place from which to sense it and observe it without getting lost in it and without ignoring it.
And it's kind of a paradox, because when you go into mindfulness-based, or when I went into mindfulness-based stress reduction class, I had all these expectations of, oh, my life is going to be better and all this. But having the expectation and having that grasping for a result is actually counterproductive. Going in just with an open willingness rather than a goal actually helps us get to that goal faster.
That's the paradox of it all, because trying to engineer your meditation so you're more peaceful will make it very unpeaceful. Because the moment something comes up, you're going to be beating yourself up. You're not going to have many of those peaceful moments. And by not having expectation it be a certain way allows it to happen more on its own. And when it's not happening, you're not bent out of shape because it's not happening. There's a place from what you're experiencing where it's just what's going on. It's not you. You can have a thought that's even a negative thought, and you're not negative about the negative thought. That's just what's happening at the moment.
That's still, I still need more practice with that. I get the idea of allowing and equanimity and all that, but when I still do tend to judge myself. I try to remember to have some self-compassion because it's only human to have judgments and to have expectations.
Yeah, so you just saying that, just right now, you say, you notice there are times when you have judgments, and at the same time you can say, but it's only human to have judgments. So when I hear you say that, you are not, there's a judgment about something, and then there's the part of you that looks at that and say, here I am judging myself, and you say, but it's only human to have judgments. That moment, that instant, just a moment ago where you could say that, it's only human to have judgments, that's not judging. Mm-hmm. So even in the context of judging, there can be a place from which you're not judging. You kind of see what I mean?
Absolutely. But it's so strange. Yeah. It's like, I see it that I'm judging, and it's okay that I'm judging. Because if I go, I see that I'm judging and, oh, I'm so judgmental, I'm a horrible person, then it spirals down.
Exactly.
It's the noticing and then letting that go.
Yeah. And even during the spiraling, it's possible to say, well, there's a part of you can look at it and say, oh, here I go into the spiral again. You know, when that happens, it all of a sudden takes on a different character. Now it's you noticing what's going on. That part of you that's noticing is not caught up in it, or you wouldn't be able to notice it. You know, so there's literally not any experience you could have that is exempt from being a mindful experience. Anything can be. And with that thought, now we get sort of into the non-dual aspect of mindfulness, which the course really doesn't touch much on, because most people come in, they want to have less stress in their lives, they want to deal better with things, they want to have a better relationship with others, with themselves. But as you practice more, there's a discovery that there's something beyond solving a particular problem, something beyond getting to a certain result. There's a place from which you can be with your own experience that is not caught up in all of that, and literally, I don't want to say separate because you're connected with all of it, but you, who you are at your core, is not being torn to bits. It's like the metaphor that sometimes used is like a lake. The surface of the lake can be really choppy and stormy and lightning and boats pitching on the surface and so on, but you go down a few hundred feet and it's very, very calm. And that doesn't mean the stuff's not happening on the surface. It's that there's a place in this body of the lake that is calm and centered at all times, even if there's something going on the surface.
Well, I look forward to that day. I feel like some days I can get there and other days I'm not. And that's okay too, right?
That's okay too. And as humans, we're not going to get there. And I get a little bit frustrated with people who think that they have to get to an enlightened state and they'll be there and be there forever if they're only successful at this. And there's nobody I know personally who is in an enlightened state that just stays there. You know, all the people I know that are practicing and teaching, we all have points at which we feel free and in flow and in sync with life and those around us, and other points where things just fall apart. And that's all part of the process. And so it's too much to expect that you'll be at a place where every moment of your life you can say, oh, this is just things happening just as they are, and it's really okay. You may not have that experience that moment. You might have it later, where you can recognize there is something that holds your experience, that holds all of it, that is not the individual emotions or individual situation.
Thank you, Dave. Well, this has been a beautiful discussion. I am so glad that we were able to connect. We have been speaking with Dave Potter about his mindfulness based stress reduction course that is absolutely free on his website, PalouseMindfulness.com. That's PALOUSE mindfulness.com. It's
And
an
Marie, if I can interrupt just for a second.
yeah.
So Palouse is a difficult word to spell, and mindfulness-based stress reduction is a lot to remember. If they just were to go on the web and do a search for mindfulness online free, Palouse Mindfulness would come up in the first 2 or 3 search results.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you, Dave. And again, Dave does this out of the goodness of his heart. He is a retired psychotherapist. So if you want to go check out the course, you can go to PalouseMindfulness.com or Google free mindfulness or free MBSR. We just have a couple minutes left in the show, Dave. If there's one thing that you'd like to leave listeners with today, what would that be?
That it's what we had said earlier, that the heart of all of this is it's about being kinder to yourself, to learn to be a friend to yourself. So I would hope that whatever people choose as their path, whether it be mindfulness-based stress reduction or anything else, that they find a way to be kinder to ourselves. Because we're, in our culture especially, we're not too good at that.
Well, thank you so much to Dave Potter for your service to the world and impacting so many lives, all for free for people who just want to. The only thing that you have to do is put in the work to do that. So, which is not the easiest part of it all, but it is there for you if you'd like to take the course for free. So thank you to Dave Potter, and thank you for being with us and spending this hour with us. I'd love to hear, if you do check out the website, how MBSR impacts your life, because I know that it has positively impacted mine. So I want to send you so much love. Be well. Namaste. Namaste.